Our favourite horror show From is back this week with episode 2 of season 3, and following on from an emotionally draining conclusion to episode 1, this week's feature was all about the aftermath of what occurred and how the town was going to get through the death of Tian-Chen. With there being light at the end of the tunnel in terms of the starvation situation, but there also being a few large revelations that look set to continue throughout season 3 surrounding Tabby, Jim, Thomas, Fatima, and also Boyd. Let's dive right into this episode and break down all that there was to take away from it. Here is From Season 3 Episode 2, Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The phone call to Jim. The first thing that I want to get into is the phone call that Jim received at the end of the episode. After the funeral for Tian-Chen, both Julie and Ethan went off to check on the animals, alone. Something which I was surprised Jim let them do, considering he was on the cusp of losing both of his children the night before whilst he wasn't there and was looking for his wife instead. You'd think maybe he might have been a bit more protective, especially considering what happened to Tian-Chen, but clearly not. It was once he went into the house and was alone for what felt like the first time in the episode where the phone rang, and then once he walked over to it there was some static noise, and he was then met with the person on the other end saying, "Dad, it's Thomas," before the static then started getting louder and was then hissing. This is something that I feel could go in one of two directions at the moment. The first is that Jim is going to be sucked in by the phone call and it's going to mess with his head, obviously. We know that he's having a hard time with his children following Tabby going missing and escaping the town, but with Thomas reaching out, it's going to take all of his focus. And maybe the type of mindset that Julie had in the first season of the show where she felt like she wasn't good enough for him and his mother will take center stage again, causing even more of a rift between them. I feel like Julie is going to be going down a dark path anyway, but this might be something that accelerates the direction that she's going to be going in. Because she's not going to have her father's support because he's going to be distracted with many other things. I think it's clear to see that the creatures are behind Thomas on the other end of the phone call. Thomas died many years ago, so I'd find it hard to believe that it would actually be him. We know that the creatures are showing more intelligence in this season, and they're sensing vulnerability in people and are wanting to quite literally break them and torment them rather than just kill. It's like they're almost playing with their food, as we saw with Boyd and Tian-Chen. So this could be one of the sick games that they're trying to play. There's also another theory that's been formed following the phone call, and that's that the boy in white could well be Thomas. When looking at who's seen the boy in white, two of the people that have are Tabby and Ethan. If it's the boy in white on the phone to Jim, that would then mean that he would have now also seen, or I suppose acknowledged his existence. This would be a twist that would need a lot of explaining for it to be pulled off in a way that makes sense, and I'm open to the idea of it for now, but I just don't think it's the best route that the show could go down. I think it's the creatures playing with Jim's head in looking to cause more of a rift between the family. There was a line that Donna said to Boyd where she mentioned how we are all we have, which shows the importance of togetherness and being as one in order to survive and hopefully find a way out. So the creatures breaking the togetherness is something that's probably top of their approach. I thought it was interesting that Thomas also communicated to Jim through a phone call, because Thomas died when both Jim and Tabby were distracted and went off to answer the phone whilst leaving him on the side whilst he was being changed. And then he ultimately fell off and died, so it felt like a sinister way of communicating to Jim. What's going on with Fatima? Every time we've seen Fatima in the first 2 episodes of this season, we've seen her leaning over the bowl and just throwing up. We know that she's got a baby on the way, but within this episode, a tooth fell out. And this spurred her on to go and get checked out, where they weren't actually too concerned about the stuff that had been happening to her. However, it was once she returned where we saw a different side to Fatima. The spoiled crops due to them being poisoned were on the porch, and when she was on her own, she grabbed a few of them and then started eating them. Fatima hadn't been able to eat for a few days, but the spoiled crops was something that she had no issues with whatsoever. This makes me think that whatever she's got growing inside of her isn't a regular human. It's kind of giving me a similar feeling to Rosemary's Baby, the person that was carrying a creature inside of them. Well, in fact, a demonic being. But I feel like whatever is going on with Fatima could well be getting inspiration from that novel and film. Time will tell with Fatima, but I somehow don't think it's going to end well. Tabitha is the chosen one. During this episode, Tabby woke up inside of Victor's father's house following her going to the address in the lunchbox that Victor gave her. Henry was wary of Tabby because he hadn't seen that lunchbox in several decades, and he called the police because he was obviously suspicious. But when Tabby mentioned about a place that nobody could escape from, showed him articles of the missing people that were trapped there, and also mentioned about the children in the tower, it reminded Henry of what his wife Miranda said. Miranda used to have these visions and felt as though she was being communicated with by children that were stuck in a tower somewhere. She painted what she saw, and there were elements of the town that were on the canvases that were in the basement. There were the children that Tabby had come across before, but the most telling painting of them all was of the boy in white, which is the last one that Tabby looked at in the episode. This was one that definitely struck a nerve with her. There had apparently been chosen ones before, some that were supposed to find a way out of the town, but none had been able to. However, with Tabby being communicated with and actually making it out of there, it insinuated that she was now the chosen one who would need to find a way to be able to free the people of the town that they were trapped in. We know that the boy in white is showing himself to Tabby in Maine, but she's going to have to find a way of being able to communicate with him in order to get some answers. One thing that was underplayed in this episode was the fact that Victor just stopped and left at the start, and then we didn't see him for the remainder of it. It was even approaching the night towards the end of the episode, so with him feeling the weight of Tian-Chen's death, I'm intrigued to see if he's going to stay out during the darkness, or if he's actually going to return. The aftermath of Tian-Chen's death. Tian-Chen's death was the very thing that was at the core of this episode, and the way that it hit everybody was extremely emotional to watch. When Boyd ran over to her body after Jade uncuffed him, it was so powerful to see, and the guilt that he had on his shoulders was the very thing that I expected him to be carrying. It was Kenny's finding out which was the hardest to see though. He was calling for his mother, was in denial that something had happened to her, and the somber, low-droning music that was playing underneath really caused the emotions to come pouring out as I was watching it. He was now alone, and when we first saw Boyd in the episode, he was speaking in Cantonese, but we didn't know what he was saying. However, by the end, we saw that it was her last words, and she said, "Take care of him. He'll be alone now." Words that were so upsetting to hear. Donna was actually angry with Boyd because she felt as though he put everybody in danger by going after the animals, even though they were the only resources that they had when it came to surviving. She felt as though togetherness and hope was at the center of what they had, which was more important than the animals, and that a death of a figurehead in the community was enough to kill some of the hope that was within the town. Boyd was actually reflecting on the sheer amount of death that had happened since he found himself there. The fact he couldn't even remember the names of the people whose car was in the pool showed that it was inescapable and that it was plaguing the town. This was what led him to want to go on the offensive to try and trap one of the creatures. So this is something that I imagine he's going to be doing with Kenny in the next episode. Reflecting on death has almost made him realize that he doesn't want to just survive there. He wants to fight to get the freedom that everybody in the town wants. So it's going to be interesting to see how he goes about it because his mindset has definitely shifted. My review of the episode. This was another great episode in the show. It wasn't as lively as the premiere, but it didn't need to be. If there had have been another large showdown or an ambush, it would have almost taken away from the potency of the first episode. In my video last week, I said how by not seeing what happened to Tian-Chen, it made it even worse because it allowed our minds to wander. However, in this episode, we got a flashback to her being killed, and it was absolutely horrific. They killed her in such a slow way, and in a way where they were just peeling the flesh off of her. It looked brutal, and it was just pure evil. The acting in this episode was genuinely top tier, and Boyd was an absolute standout for me. The emotions that he conveyed, I just felt every single one of them, and I couldn't help but feel the pain, upset, and responsibility that was on his shoulders. There's not a single arc in this show that is boring when compared to the other. Whilst Tabby's one is more of a slow burner, and it feels like it's one that we have to be patient with, I think the payoff and the reward of the outcome is going to be worth sticking with. In terms of horror, this show knows how to drift between psychological and making you feel uncomfortable, and also the visual and gore. It balances it out perfectly, and I'm always really impressed with it. With a week to wait until the next episode, bring it on. So, there you have it, from Season 3 Episode 2, Ending Explained. If you want to see breakdowns of every episode in Season 3, then click on the card in the top corner. I'm covering the entirety of the season, so keep an eye out for weekly breakdowns. What did you think of this episode? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.